Picture this. A diver spends 20 minutes untangling a fishing line from a sea turtle's flipper. The turtle doesn't bite, doesn't flee, it just floats there, watching, almost like it knows exactly what's happening. And when it's finally free, it does something strange. It doesn't bolt. It circles back. It nudges the diver's hand. Coincidence? Or does that turtle actually understand what just happened to it? That question sounds simple. It is not simple. In fact, it's one of the messiest, most fiercely argued questions in all of animal behavior science. And today we're ripping it wide open. Because the honest answer is sometimes yes, sometimes no, and sometimes we genuinely have no idea. And the reason why is way weirder than you'd expect. Stick around, because by the end of this, you're going to look at every animal video in your recommended feed a little differently. Let's start with the obvious cases, the ones that make you go, okay, clearly this animal gets it. Dolphins are the poster children here. There are documented, filmed, verified cases of dolphins approaching divers and swimmers specifically because they're tangled in nets or fishing gear and staying calm, almost cooperative, while humans cut them free. One famous case off the coast of Hawaii involved a dolphin that swam directly up to divers, presented its fin wrapped in fishing line like it was handing over paperwork at a customer service desk, and just waited. Didn't thrash, didn't panic. When the line finally came off, the dolphin did slow, deliberate loops around the boat before swimming away, which researchers describe, very cautiously, as behavior that resembles what we'd call gratitude in humans. Cautiously, because scientists absolutely hate committing to words like grateful when talking about animals. We'll get to exactly why in a bit, because it's the crux of this entire video. Then there's the whale story, and if you haven't heard this one, buckle up, because it's wild. In 2005, a female humpback whale off the coast of California got tangled in crab trap lines. We're talking over 20 traps, hundreds of pounds of gear wrapped around her body, her tail, even looped through her mouth. She was basically anchored to the ocean floor, slowly drowning under the weight of her own rescue equipment gone wrong. A rescue team spent nearly an hour cutting her free, at genuine risk to themselves, because one wrong move from a panicking 40-ton animal and you're not a rescuer anymore, you're a statistic. When she was finally free, she didn't swim away immediately. She swam around each diver, one at a time, slowly, and nudged them gently with her nose. One diver later said it was the most humbling moment of his entire life. Whether that whale knew, in some deep cognitive sense, that these tiny pink creatures had just saved her life, we can't prove. But the behavior sure looked like recognition. It sure looked like thanks. Okay, but here's where it gets genuinely interesting. Because for every one of these heartwarming stories, there's a case that makes scientists want to throw their clipboards into the ocean out of pure frustration. Take elephants. Elephants are famous for their memory, famous for complex social bonds, famous for mourning their dead for days. Surely they'd recognize a human who helped them, right? Well, sort of. There are elephant sanctuaries, especially across Thailand and Kenya, where injured elephants are nursed back to health by the same caretakers for years at a time. Those elephants absolutely form attachments to specific humans. They'll seek them out, follow them around, even seem distressed when that person leaves for the day. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. Is that recognition of "you helped me," or is it just recognition of "you're the source of food and safety and I associate you with good things"? Those sound like the same thing, but to a researcher, they're completely different mental processes. One requires understanding cause and effect over time. This human performed an action, that action led to my well-being, therefore this human is good. The other just requires basic association. You show up, good things happen, I like you. Your dog does the second one every single time you open a bag of treats. That doesn't mean your dog understands agriculture or supply chains, no matter how smart he looks doing it. And this is the wall that basically every scientist studying animal cognition eventually slams into. It's called the problem of other minds. And it's been haunting philosophy and psychology for literal centuries. We can never directly access what's happening inside another creature's head. Not even another human's, honestly. We just assume other people have inner experiences because they're built like us and, crucially, because they can tell us about it. With animals, we don't even get the telling part. We only get behavior. And behavior can look completely identical whether there's rich understanding behind it or whether there's just a very sophisticated set of instincts running on autopilot. So, how do scientists even try to answer this without just guessing? Turns out there are a few genuinely clever tricks. One is the famous mirror test, and if you've spent any time on the internet, you've probably seen this. Researchers put a mark on an animal's body somewhere it can't see directly, then show it a mirror. If the animal touches or investigates the mark on its own body using the mirror to guide its hand or paw, that suggests real self-recognition, an understanding of that reflection is me, not another animal. Species that have passed versions of this test include chimpanzees, orangutans, dolphins, elephants, and, weirdly, some magpies. Dogs, by the way, consistently fail it, which used to make people assume dogs weren't self-aware. Except then someone pointed out dogs experience the world primarily through smell, not sight, so of course a visual mirror test is basically meaningless to them. It'd be like testing a blind person's intelligence using a painting, which is a great reminder for this entire video. Just because an animal doesn't demonstrate understanding in the specific way we test for it doesn't mean the understanding isn't there. We might just be asking the question in the wrong language entirely. That brings us to a much more direct kind of evidence. Animals that seem to specifically seek out humans, on purpose, in a way that looks like they understand people as a resource, a partner, even a friend. And honestly, no animal demonstrates this better than crows. Crows are absurdly, almost unsettlingly smart. Corvid researchers, people who study crows and ravens and magpies for a living, have documented crows using tools, planning ahead for future needs, holding what look like grudges against specific humans for literal years, and recognizing individual human faces well enough to warn other crows in the area to avoid that person. There's a well-known case of a crow in Seattle that would specifically seek out one particular researcher and drop bottle caps, buttons, and shiny trinkets near her, almost like tiny thank you gifts, after she'd been feeding it consistently for months. Was that a genuine gesture of gratitude? An actual conceptual trait of, you give me food, I give you shiny object? Or was it simpler than that? Crows are natural hoarders of interesting objects, and this was just incidental behavior that got romanticized by an internet audience desperate for a heartwarming story. Honestly, researchers are split down the middle on this one. But what tips the scale a little toward there's something going on here is that the gifting was targeted. It wasn't random. It happened specifically near the person who'd helped the crow, not near strangers walking the same path. That specificity is a big deal in animal cognition research because randomness is easy to explain away as coincidence. But specificity usually means something is being tracked, remembered, and deliberately acted upon. Let's talk about something even weirder now. Rescued wild animals that return, seemingly to say thanks, sometimes years afterward. This one drifts into borderline urban legend territory, but there are enough independently documented cases that scientists don't just dismiss it outright anymore. Wildlife rehabilitators, the people who nurse injured foxes, birds of prey, even big cats back to health before releasing them back into the wild, report animals returning to visit, sometimes years later, sometimes even bringing their own offspring along, almost like a proud parent showing off the family to an old friend. One of the most famous examples involves a leopard in South Africa that, after being raised by a wildlife photographer following the death of its mother, would still approach that same photographer decades later, in the wild, as a fully grown adult predator, and behave with something close to genuine affection, rubbing against him the way a house cat rubs against furniture. A wild leopard, an animal capable of killing a grown human in about 4 seconds if it wanted to. Choosing instead gentleness, over and over again for years. That's not nothing. But, and this part matters a lot, none of this proves the animal has an abstract concept of help the way you or I understand it. It might just prove something almost as fascinating, that animals form durable, individual, long-term memories of specific humans and associate them with safety, comfort, and positive emotional states, and that this association persists even after years of separation. That's not the same as understanding gratitude as a moral concept. But it's also not nothing at all. It's actually kind of beautiful in its own way because it suggests animals build real relationships, not just Pavlovian triggers, actual bonds that survive time and distance. By the way, if you want to go even deeper into the secret lives of ancient humans, I just launched a full course called The Secret Lives of Ancient Humans. 10 modules, 3+ hours of content covering everything we never talk about on YouTube. What they feared, how they communicated, what hunted them, and much more. Plus an exclusive PDF guide included. Link in the description. See you inside. Now here's a curveball that changes the whole conversation. Animals that help humans, sometimes without being asked, sometimes at real risk to themselves, which flips the entire question on its head. Dogs pulling drowning people from water is the classic example, obviously, but let's go somewhere less expected. There are multiple recorded incidents of wild dolphins protecting swimmers from shark attacks by forming a tight circle around the person and physically blocking the shark, sometimes for extended periods, until the threat passes or help arrives. There's a case off the coast of New Zealand where a group of dolphins did exactly this for a group of lifeguards being circled by a great white shark. Now, dolphins are known to perform this exact defensive circling behavior for their own kind too, especially for calves, whenever a predator shows up. So a skeptic would say, the dolphins weren't rescuing humans out of altruism, they were just running a standard predator defense protocol, and the humans happened to benefit from being inside the circle at the time. That's probably at least partly true. But here's the thing that complicates it further. This behavior has been observed toward injured or vulnerable humans specifically, far more often than toward humans who are just swimming around normally, minding their own business. Which suggests dolphins might be picking up on distress signals the same way they'd pick up on distress in another dolphin and applying that same protective instinct across species lines entirely. That's genuinely remarkable if true, because it means the understanding isn't necessarily, I recognize this creature is a human and humans deserve protection. It's something more like, this creature is vulnerable, and vulnerability triggers my protective instinct. Full stop. Regardless of species. Which might actually be an even more profound kind of empathy than the specific, human-centered version, because it isn't tribal. It doesn't require the animal to categorize us as special, it just requires them to recognize suffering and respond to it. That's a pretty low bar for kindness, honestly, and yet plenty of humans struggle to clear it on an average Tuesday. Let's pump the brakes for a second though, because I promised you this video wouldn't just be a highlight reel of heartwarming animal clips set to emotional music, and it's time to be the annoying friend who ruins the vibe with actual facts. A huge amount of what looks like animals knowing we helped them can be explained by something far less magical. Associative learning, combined with our own overwhelming tendency to project human emotions onto animal faces and body language. This has an actual scientific name. It's called Anthropomorphism, and it is one of the biggest traps in the entire field of animal behavior research. Humans are pattern recognition machines, and specifically, we're wired to recognize other minds, other intentions, other emotions, because that skill kept our ancestors alive in complex, dangerous social groups for hundreds of thousands of years. The problem is that this wiring doesn't just switch off because we're looking at a turtle instead of a person. We see a slow blink from a cat and think, oh, that's a kiss, when really it might just be a cat blinking slowly because it's relaxed, no symbolic meaning required whatsoever. We see a dog smiling and forget that dogs don't have the facial musculature to smile the way humans do. That's simply how their mouth naturally sits. We are constantly instinctively reading human-shaped stories into animal-shaped behavior, and scientists have to actively fight this instinct every single day in their research, because if you're not careful, you'll design an entire study around a conclusion you already emotionally wanted to be true before you even collected the data. This is exactly why, for decades, the scientific mainstream treated any suggestion of animal gratitude, animal understanding, or animal moral reasoning as borderline unprofessional. Talking seriously about animal emotions used to get you laughed out of academic conferences. The dominant view, especially through the mid-20th century, was called behaviorism. And it basically argued, don't even bother asking what's happening inside an animal's head, because you can't measure it directly. So just study observable behavior and stimulus response patterns and leave the mind stuff to philosophers. This was partly reasonable scientific caution, and partly, honestly, a kind of intellectual cowardice because we can't know for sure, so let's not even try, became a convenient excuse to avoid a genuinely hard, genuinely uncomfortable question. That's finally starting to change. And here's the twist that makes this whole topic worth caring about. The pendulum has swung hard in the other direction over just the past 15 or 20 years. There's an entire modern field now called cognitive ethology, dedicated specifically to studying animal minds using rigorous, careful methods instead of just vibes and viral videos. And what these researchers keep finding again and again is that animal cognition is far richer, far more complex, and far more emotionally sophisticated than the old behaviorist model ever allowed for. Octopuses solve elaborate multi-step puzzles and seem to have genuinely distinct personalities. Some bold and curious, others shy and cautious, consistent across their entire short lives. Rats show behavior that looks remarkably like empathy, freeing trapped cage mates even when there's zero reward involved, and even when they could eat a nearby treat instead, and choose to help first anyway. Pigs outperform dogs on several standardized cognitive tests, which is going to make your next bacon sandwich hit a little different. Fish. Yes, fish, the animals we usually assume have a 3-second memory, have been shown to recognize individual human faces and remember specific people who fed them, weeks after the fact, even when those people change their clothes. There's also a fascinating angle in mutualism, the natural partnerships some species have formed with each other over evolutionary time, that gives us a clue about how understanding help might not even require a big brain at all. Cleaner fish and the larger fish they clean have a relationship where the big fish could easily eat the tiny cleaner, but doesn't, because it recognizes on some level that the ongoing service is worth more than a single meal. Groupers have even been observed actively recruiting help, swimming to a moray eel and performing a specific head-shaking signal that essentially means, "Come hunt with me. I found something we can't reach alone." That's an invitation. That's recognizing another species as a problem-solving partner without a shred of mammalian brainpower behind it. If a fish can figure out, "I need help," and that creature over there can provide it, maybe the bar for understanding a rescue isn't nearly as high as we assume. So where does all of this actually leave us on the core question? Do animals know when we're helping them? Here's the most honest answer science can currently give you, and it's a satisfying one, even if it's not a clean yes or no. Many animals almost certainly do not understand help as an abstract moral concept the way humans do. They're not sitting there thinking, "This human performed an altruistic action motivated by compassion, and I now owe them a debt of gratitude." That kind of abstract moral reasoning may genuinely be limited to humans, or at most to a small handful of species with unusually developed social cognition, like some of the great apes. But, and this is the important part, the part worth remembering, understanding help as an abstract concept, and recognizing that something good happened because of a specific individual are two completely different things. A huge number of animals are absolutely capable of the second one. They remember specific individuals. They associate those individuals with relief from pain, danger, or fear. They change their behavior toward those individuals afterward, sometimes for years, sometimes for the rest of their lives. And in some species, especially the smartest ones, corvids, cetaceans, elephants, great apes, there's growing evidence they can track cause and effect well enough to behave in ways that look a whole lot like understanding, even if we can't ever prove there's a little voice inside going, "Thank you." And maybe that's the real twist this whole video has been building toward. Maybe we've been asking the wrong question this entire time. We keep asking, "Do animals know?" like it's a simple yes or no light switch, understanding either fully on or fully off. But minds, even human minds, don't actually work like light switches. They work more like dimmer switches on a huge spectrum, with different species landing at wildly different points depending on how their brains evolved to solve the specific problems their environment threw at them over millions of years. A crow's mind doesn't need to be a lesser version of a human mind to be remarkable. It just needs to be really, really good at being a crow mind. And by that standard, plenty of animals are almost shockingly aware of the world around them, including, it turns out, the fact that sometimes, for reasons they may not fully articulate even to themselves, a strange two-legged creature showed up and made the pain stop. So the next time you see a video of a sea turtle nudging a diver's hand, or a magpie leaving trinkets for the person who fed it, or an elephant wrapping its trunk gently around the arm of the caretaker who raised it as a calf, you don't need to pretend you know exactly what's happening inside that animal's head because, honestly, nobody does. Not even the scientists who've spent their entire careers studying it. But you also don't need to dismiss it as pure coincidence or wishful human projection either. The truth is, sitting somewhere in the middle, in that strange, beautiful, unresolved space where two very different kinds of minds manage somehow, against enormous odds, to understand each other just a little bit. And maybe that's actually more amazing than a simple yes would have ever been, because it means real connection doesn't require identical minds. It just requires two creatures paying enough attention to notice each other, and for a whale, a crow, a leopard, or a stray dog on the side of the road, sometimes noticing is enough.